What the hell am I doing here? I can't believe I decided to do this. And now a hurricane. When are we going to get out of here? Hi, I'm Borowsky. It all started with an ad in a sailing magazine. It was billed as the adventure of a lifetime. All I had to do was write an essay explaining why I'd want to be crew on a race across the Atlantic Ocean. And if I won, I could do it for free. How could I not apply? You would think that having grown up in Miami Beach and going to school in San Francisco, I would have gotten into sailing at some point. But I never sailed until moving to Colorado. Now sailing's become more than a hobby, it's become a passion. When I found out that I won the contest from Blue Water Sailing magazine, I couldn't believe it. The contest would place me on one of the boats racing in the Challenge Transat 2002, the annual race from Southampton, England to Boston, as one of its regular crew. The race was put on by the Challenge business, founded by Sir Che Blythe, the first man to row across the Atlantic.
The Challenge business was started out of frustration, really. We knew a lot of people wanted to go long distance sailing, and a lot of people hadn't got a lot of sailing experience. But how could they? There was no sort of mechanism for them to do that. To go on an ocean race, for example, say around the world, you had to be very highly skilled to have lots and lots of money and buy your own yacht. So we thought if we could build a yacht, spread the cost as far and as wide as possible and get sponsorship involved, we might be able to offer people that opportunity, and we would be able to train them had they got no experience or little experience.
I was at once excited and scared out of my mind. What had I gotten myself into this time? But I figured, how many chances do you get in life to do something like this? I've always liked a good adventure. This was certainly something off the charts. Would I be able to handle this kind of sailing? What about the storms and hurricanes? What if I didn't get along with the other people who probably knew much more about sailing than me? Well, I decided, with my boss's blessing, to do it. I wanted to see if I could pull it off and prove to myself what I was capable of. After all, the Challenge business was founded on that principle.
The Challenge Transat, like all Challenge business events, really gives individuals the opportunity to do something they'd never normally have the chance to do. It gives them the opportunity to test themselves physically, actually racing these magnificent boats across an ocean, test themselves intellectually, learning about sailing, about the weather, and also very much testing themselves emotionally, leaving loved ones at home, getting on with their teammates, all the interpersonal relationships and challenges that you often get when you've got a boat with only 72 feet to escape from another person, and actually getting off the boat at the other end with that real sense of achievement, real sense that you've done something that very, very few people have the opportunity to do. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
The Challenge business supplied me with a ton of reading materials, checklists, and a training schedule. Several months before the race, I spent 2 weeks in Boston training with other crew volunteers from all over the country. Fortunately, some had never sailed before, so I felt a little bit better about my own minimal experience. It felt great to be out there on a nice big boat, but I was totally exhausted after 10 days. We learned and practiced a lot of stuff, but I think all of us were happy not to have to change another sail for a few months. By the time I finally flew to England, I was hoping I was ready for this and not getting into something that was too far over my head. Arriving by train in Ocean Village Marina in Southampton was surreal. Here were the boats that I had studied for the last few months. This was actually happening. I met my fellow crewmates, all extremely friendly and mostly British. There was Mike, Tom, Michelle, Dave, Tex, who was the only other American besides myself, John, Jane, Danny, Alan, Simon, Ronan, Bob, our skipper JB, and our first mate Laz. My first challenge was to try and remember everyone's names. We spent the first week at the marina cleaning every inch of the boat. Many things needed to be attended to before we could leave, and every time we finished a task, we would check in and be assigned something else on Laz's never-ending list. There were bulbs to be changed, sails strengthened, bilges cleaned, winches lubricated, the crew kept happy, and more bilges to be cleaned. Now, I'm not a very mechanically minded person, so everything was new to me, and I just asked lots of questions when I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I got to know everybody during this week, and we had lots of time in the evenings to carouse in the local pubs and discuss our upcoming adventure. We were all a little unsure as to what we were getting into, but we were beginning to gel quite nicely as a team, and that was giving us a lot of confidence. One of the biggest tasks was getting our food ready for the voyage. Thanks to JB's wife Michelle, we had lots of easy-to-follow recipes, and her guidance in preparing everything for the trip. Many hours were spent mixing and measuring and counting and sorting, and then everything was dehydrated so as to take up as little space as possible on the boat. There were official inspections of our safety equipment, as well as inventories that needed to be done to account for every little part on the boat. Basically, each of the 6 boats were to be identical. The radar, GPS, computer software, life vests, the number of galley silverware, the number of sails and spare parts. The only difference in each boat was the crew.
Challenge business gets people to do things like an ocean race because lots of people they want a big adventure in their lives, and it's hard to find a really good adventure. The challenge business makes it accessible and makes it safe because we have these great boats and professionals that know what they're doing and know how to keep it all safe. So. Some people say when you're on your deathbed all you've got is a hat full of memories, and this trip's going to be something for everyone's hat.
Getting to know my fellow crewmates was exciting. We all came from different age groups, and we all had different kinds of jobs back home. Everybody had different reasons for wanting to do this trip.
I guess I wanted to do a bit of sailing, and that all came about. And then it also struck me that many thousands of my ancestors from Ireland had come to America in that way, and I thought it'd be pretty special to come across the Atlantic and to arrive in Boston, which is probably the most Irish city in America. I thought that was just incredible. And at times I got strength from that as well, because so many people had died making the crossing, and for us, our lives were never really risked. So kind of put things in perspective and helped me get on with doing what I needed to do.
And the transatlantic was always the big one to do, and I always rather had an ambition to do it. And finding myself at the age of 50 with the time to do it, I had to do it.
By the time we left the docks at Ocean Village to set out for the start line, we were primed and ready to go. Emotions were high as many family members came out to say goodbye and wish us well. It was tough to leave people behind, especially not really knowing what lay ahead. I didn't know about anyone else, but I was nervous. Here we were, about to start sailing across the oceans, and once we started across, there was no getting off. Luckily, it was a gorgeous day for the start of the race. It was great to be sailing in some of the most famous sailing waters in the world, where the Solent meets the English Channel, and the world-famous sailing port of Cowes on the Isle of Wight was our starting line. It was pretty obvious that I wasn't the only one excited about our imminent departure. And so, at 3 p.m. on August 25th, we finally crossed the start line, and the race was on. It was a beautiful sight to see the spinnakers go up on our competitors' boats, and soon enough, it was our turn. Like clockwork, we all performed our duties admirably, and we all felt better now that we were actually on our way. The next few days, as we sailed out of the English Channel and into the open waters of the Atlantic, were a time to get adjusted and make our little nest into our home for the next few weeks. We were split into 2 watches of 7 people each, and this rotation ensured that while one group was above working, the other group was below, eating, sleeping, washing. Basically, whatever you wanted to do with your time off. During the day, the watches were 6 hours on and 6 hours off. At night, which was from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., it was 4 hours on and 4 hours off. The watches changed every day, so it was never the same schedule. Many times we were often kept company by a gang of dolphins on our bow. They seemed to very much enjoy hanging out with us, and we were honored to have them with us. Oftentimes throughout the race, their appearance would inspire us on. When I was on watch up on deck, when it was nice, it was great. We had quite a few beautiful blue sky days where we could wear shorts and t-shirts, and it felt like we were sailing in the Caribbean. But then, the next thing you knew, the winds had picked up, the rain began, and the sails needed to be changed. Changing sails is a big part of ocean racing, as having too much sail will overpower the boat and could damage something, and having too little sail will make you go too slow and you'll lose the race. So we were always fine-tuning our sails to get the best wind angles The sails are very heavy, even more so when wet. The task of bringing a sail up on deck from down below, hanging it on, taking the old one down, raising the new one, bringing the old one to the back of the boat, carefully folding it up and placing it in its own special bag with its own peculiar zipper, all of this was extremely physically demanding labor, and especially when the weather was rough, as it was many times throughout our voyage, it wreaked havoc on our bodies, and it was a great relief to go below decks and eat a hot meal before getting in our warm bunks to get a few hours of sleep before we had to go up again and repeat the whole affair. Eating and sleeping on an ocean racing boat is very unique, primarily because everything is at an extreme angle most of the time. Each day, one person was selected to do what they called a mother watch, meaning they were in charge of preparing all the meals for a particular time period, as well as cleaning the galley and the heads. It was a real treat to eat hot meals 3 times a day, but some meals like curried chicken were repeated so often that they became a running joke. On the occasions that I had to do mother watch, I read and reread the detailed instructions that JB's wife had prepared and attempted to do the best job that I could do. The last thing I wanted to do was get everyone sick due to my cooking. Cooking in a galley that is perpetually tilting over is hard on the best of people. But I guess I managed to perform my duties well because I was so happy when people actually asked for seconds.
The high points was seeing other people achieve things that they never thought they could. And, you know, one of the things that I have said was when Bruce sort of like produced his food and he was just so amazed that people wanted to eat it and then asked for more, and his face was just, I just thought, that is just amazing.
We got a real chance to see how we all worked as a crew when we put the spinnaker up. The spinnaker sail's used only when going downwind. Because of that, there has to be great coordination and communication between all parts of the boat. We were able to gradually tweak the whole process, and it was a great feeling to put the big sail up quickly and gracefully. It took a lot more work to sail with it, but it was worth it for the extra speed we got out of it. Watching it, you could really feel the power of the wind. Some of my favorite moments were in the evening, usually after a beautiful sunset. Keeping watch on deck late into the night, it was incredible looking at the stars, and there were tons of shooting stars. Never in my life had I spent so much time with so many people in such cramped quarters. Sure, we all got on each other's nerves a little bit, but that was to be expected. It was all how you dealt with it. They had told us at the beginning that one of the most important things that we could bring with us on this trip was a sense of humor. And that turned out to be very true. Without a sense of humor, I think we all might have killed one another. But by dealing with things at the moment and then laughing about it later, we were all able to keep our spirits up and enjoy ourselves. Personal hygiene was an interesting topic. Showers were available, but only every other day, as we didn't want to use that much water, in case the water maker broke down unexpectedly. Though incredibly important and a top priority, I have to say the heads were the bane of my existence. Of course they were a necessary evil, but you can't imagine a more horrible spectacle than of trying to relieve oneself amidst the insanity of a tiny cubicle that's moving around at insane angles while trying to keep your balance and take care of business. The toilets were even hinged to fit the heel angle more appropriately. It is said that 80% of the accidents on boats happen in the galley and in the heads, and it became all too clear why. If you're not holding on when a wave hits, you go flying into something. Throughout the trip, some people suffered from seasickness. Especially when we hit one of the many storms along the way, they occasionally found themselves out of commission for a while, and we all felt bad for them.
Well, the obvious lows were probably when I was feeling ill. The frustration of not being able to perform in a way I wanted to, not having the strength to do things I knew I was capable of doing, and at times feeling that I was letting the team down. Those were real lows.
Sleeping on the short watches at night was tricky, but usually we were so exhausted after being up on deck that it wasn't hard at all to fall asleep, even though you felt like you might fall out of your bunk. The bunks were actually hanging pieces of canvas, and you'd lay out your sleeping bag and crawl in. It wasn't the best for someone who's claustrophobic, as many times your face would be only inches from the bunk above you. Once again, you'd have to have a really good sense of humor to enjoy this, as there was no concept of personal space. Someone from the watch up top would come down at, say, 3:40 in the morning, wake everyone up, and you had about 15 minutes in which to wake up, pull yourself out of your tiny bunk, stagger to the toilet, put on your clothes, eat something that the previous watch had prepared, and then struggle to put on your foul weather gear that was still soaking wet from when you took it off about 4 hours ago.
The low point for me was climbing into a wet, cold, smelly bunk at the end of a long, cold, dark, rainy, sprayy, miserable watch on deck when you're fed up with other people and you're tired and you want some decent food and a decent night's sleep and you just think, I'm not going through this squalor again. That's very quickly forgotten.
As our watch worked so closely day after day after day, I began forming great friendships with several crew members. We would talk for hours on end about our lives back home, our dreams upon returning, what we wanted to do with our lives, all sorts of stuff that comes up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Seeing a group of novice sailors or inexperienced sailors pull through and become a team so bonded and so strong, and to know that I've been part of that, and to know that I played a big part in teaching that, and that is a nice thing to feel, and to see people's strengths and weaknesses and work with those and pull them out of each person.
Well, we'd had a few storms hit us by now, so we knew when we finally had some nice weather, we could dry out our foul weather gear in the sun. Those days were glorious. I was able to get re-energized, get some extra sleep, and enjoy the toilet more as the bouncing and crashing wasn't so severe. But now, the latest weather faxes were reporting a hurricane soon to be in our path. A hurricane! Oh, that's all we needed. Talk of the hurricane swept through the boat like a rogue wave. We all wondered what it would really be like once it hit us. All day, the wind and waves picked up. It was gradual, but definitely noticeable. Though we were apprehensive about even the word hurricane, to JB it was a source of fantastic wind. Where cruising boats would be trying to get out of the way, we were destined to take advantage of the wind that the storm would be providing us, all in a safe way, of course. Down below, our regular tasks of eating and sleeping and personal hygiene were all shot to hell, as now the boat was slamming harder than ever into the wind and going ever higher and lower into the steep waves. Even the regular task of taking on and off our fallies was passed over, as even that became too hard to do with the boat's rocking motion. The hurricane was hitting us on our last approach into the east coast of the United States. We were all tired to begin with, having been gone now over 2 weeks, so the endurance needed to make it through this was indescribable. Taking down and putting up sails was now seemingly 10 times harder than before, and definitely more dangerous as the waves threatened to wash you over every time you went up front. When our watch started at midnight, we went up top to 45-knot winds and water constantly in our faces. I watched as the knot meter gusted to 50, almost 60 miles an hour, and knew that if we made it through this, we were almost home. There are times in our lives where we have the opportunity to test ourselves, and this was mine. When I went below at the end of my watch, I felt amazed at the fact that I had stood my ground, and that I had faced my fears for hours on end.
And I think you put yourself into situations where you wouldn't have normally been. You were in the hurricane, you were there, you were doing it, and it's a very hard thing to do, and you've got to drive yourself hard, and I think everyone pushed themselves, especially you push yourself very close to the limit, and maybe beyond. I don't know how you feel, but maybe beyond.
Sleep was not kind, as the boat was rolling so much due to the steep waves. But when I went up on deck the next morning for my watch, it was incredibly exciting to see something that made it all worthwhile. Land! I immediately recognized the curved tip of Cape Cod from my training sail a few months before. I knew we were now in the final stretch of getting back home. However, there was work to be done. Apparently, we had lost our lead in the night to Logica. We were now behind, though only by a little bit. We were in second place. As it got dark, we strained to catch up.
The low point was on the last day, coming into Boston, just at the end of my watch with Tex, and was discussing coming second behind Logica. And we were sat there, we went to bed, we were saying, you know, it's going to be one big miracle for the skipper to be able to pull this one off, because we were quite a few miles behind.
JB pulled every knot of speed he could out of the soft, fickle wind. He was in his element, though. He loves the extremes. Light winds and heavy winds are his favorites. When on one of the last tacks into the harbor, Logica failed to tack at the appropriate moment, JB took advantage of their tactical error, tacked ahead of them, and there we were, in the lead. The last couple of tacks we performed were almost spiritual in the way we executed them. We certainly didn't want to let JB down now after he had gotten us this far. Up ahead were the lights of Boston. We couldn't believe we were about to win this race. For almost 3 weeks, we had fought long and hard to keep the boat going at maximum speed day and night, even when we were physically and mentally exhausted.
I think the best 6 hours I had was when all of us were on deck, chasing Logica from 9 miles behind to coming up to the finish line there, and the sail changes, the tacks, the boat positioning, everything we did as a team made that boat win, and it was a wonderful feeling.
Everyone had such huge smiles on their faces as we sailed the last few miles to the finish line. I swear everyone even had a tear or two at some point. I know I did.
For a couple of days, it didn't look like we were going to be able to do it, and you know, Logica were right with us, so we had the sight of them every day, and then even with just a couple of hours to go, it looked like they just had the lead. So when we finally made it here, and then to sort of hear my family on the pier, and amongst other things, it was just incredible.
Finally, at 2:45 in the morning on Friday the 13th, we crossed the finish line. Knowing what we all went through to get here, all the hard work we had put into it, and now it was all paying off. Not only had we made it across an ocean, over 3,000 miles, but we had won the race by 8 minutes.
That was the finish. Coming into the dock and meeting friends, family, the welcome was just awesome. It was just great. That was my high point, without a doubt.
One of the most amazing things, probably the hardest thing I'll ever do, ever.
As the lights of the TV cameras on the media boat shined on us, we all realized the dream. Arriving on the dock at Rose Wharf in Boston, we were greeted by tons of people, the lights of TV cameras, and tray after tray of hamburgers, French fries, and of course, champagne. The feelings I had standing at the dock on our arrival were incredible. After 18 days and 16 hours, it was one of the most intense moments of my life. Knowing I had just accomplished something so incredible, so far-fetched, I had actually made it through the biggest challenge of my life. And succeeded.